We're going to talk football. John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, the NFL. 16 days away. The Eagles are at camp. We'll talk some birds. We'll talk some NFL. I'm interested in a lot of NFL stuff right now as we get really close. I mean, you can almost feel it, taste it, smell it. You've been inside my car. It stinks like NFL training camp in there.
Lane Johnson sent out a tweet today where he was jonesing for football. So if Lane Johnson is tweeting, we must be getting close.
Well, I know one of the things about this offseason that we've really talked a lot about, John, is the fact that the Eagles' offensive line has been getting praised a lot. And Jason Kelsey today saying that, hey, we think we got the best 2 tackles in football. I saw somebody post on our Facebook page when we talked about Lane Johnson. You know, their concern was how good will Lane Johnson be? You know, how can we depend on him to be as good? Maybe the reason he's been good is he's been popped twice for PEDs. Is that a fair statement there for Lane Johnson?
Well, I mean, you can speculate as to that, and certainly people have, and that's part of the reason why it's so upsetting for him personally is because people will always default, certain people at least will always default to that as the reason he became the player he became. But you know, it takes more than that. It really does. It's not only size and strength, it's technique, it's playing together. We always talk about the continuity on the offensive line. So there's a lot of reasons why Lane Johnson has turned into one of the better right tackles in football. In size is just one of them, and if you believe his explanation as far as supplements and the reason he failed the latest test, it's certainly not going to be an issue, but it's always going to be sort of a blemish on his resume. And there are people who are going to speculate that if he's not on certain substances, he's not going to be the same player. The only way he can handle that is to go out and be the same player. He certainly looked.
What about, John, the last handful of games that he played? I mean, shouldn't that be – they won. The record with him in the lineup was significantly better. I would imagine that he came back and was probably not using anything when he came back.
Yeah, I mean, you would hope. I mean, after sitting out 10 games. Look, I'm not going to pretend that and say that there's no performance-enhancing drugs in the NFL. I'd be lying to you. And a lot of guys don't get caught ever because it's they're very advanced. And
what's the protocol? Like, basically, you got to be a fool to get caught. Like, right? I mean. For you to get caught with
you got to be a fool to get caught in the substance abuse policy,
right? Like the marijuana, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you have to be a real fool to get caught with that. It's one test a year. You know the window. The NFLPA tweets it out every year. That's how obvious it is, which is a signal. Hey, stay off it until you get your one test, and once you get your one test, you know you're good for the year. And interestingly, it always starts around April 20th. That's just the irony of it, and it ends at the end of training camp. So, if you're a serial user of marijuana and you have some bad luck, you won't be able to use it for a few months. But again, the guys with a modicum of common sense understand how to beat the system. The PED policy is much more stringent, but hey, in every sport, the cheaters are always ahead of the testers, and there's always some kind of new drug. And I'm not speculating that Lane or anybody else on the Eagles are doing it, but the reality is that there's PEDs in professional sports.
Yeah, I know this week, I guess it was D'Angelo Williams made some waves saying that the NFL doesn't really do enough. I mean, it takes what, John, 6 times to get nailed with marijuana before you get a year suspension and that you can't go. You can still go to the facilities when you're on the 4-gamer and the 10-gamer.
Yeah, they've changed. They've loosened it. You know, back in the old days, you weren't allowed, and I've been writing about that for years. That to me makes no sense. You know, you can make excuses for guys, and I understand a lot of people certainly do for lobby for marijuana to be acceptable. But, you know, if you're failing that many tests, it's probably a good indication you have a problem. And if you have a problem to be a professional, you need to beat it. And to me, taking away the structure is silly. I mean, these are the people who, in theory, need the most help, and you're sort of leaving them to their own devices and setting them adrift. It doesn't make much sense unless it's just about penalizing the player, and the NFL claims it's not, and they have all of these sort of thresholds where you can get help, but taking away the structure of an NFL day doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, national columnist, FanRag Sports NFL, at JF McMullen on Twitter. As we know, the Eagles are, 16 days away from the start of training camp, and we talked a lot about the roster battles leading up to this. I want to get your thoughts on the inside the division right now. Pro Football Focus did the best passing offenses in the league. They had the Eagles ranked 15th, Washington 7th, Dallas 8th, and the Giants 19th. So they're basically saying a team that has Odell Beckham, added Brandon Marshall, and has Eli Manning is below Philadelphia for the best passing offense. Do you think Philly's passing game has made significant strides to put them in the top half, John? Because they were, bottom 3 last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has. We've talked about the additions, and Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith just specifically added to what they had last season. I think on paper, it certainly looks to be much improved. And I've been talking for a while about the Giants doing it with mirrors last year. As far as it offensively, they had a very good defense, but the offensive line was bad, the quarterback was bad, the running game was bad, and they had OBJ, who's obviously a tremendous player, but is also prone to losing his cool on the field at times, especially when he gets up against really physical cornerbacks. So it doesn't surprise me that the Giants were that low, and the fact that the Eagles are mid-range, that's a good place to put them before the season, because you have to see the assumption is Carson Wentz is going to get better. And second-year players usually, certainly at that position, they get incrementally better. So I think it's logical to expect some improvement.
I know Kirk Cousins, he's part of the passing game. They have Washington at number 1. Do you like Washington's passing game as the best in the East?
I do. It's interesting because if you look at the quarterbacks in this division, you got a 2-time Super Bowl winner. You have Dak Prescott, who had the spectacular rookie year, and then you have Carson Wentz, who obviously was the second overall pick and looks like he's the real deal. And the best quarterback in the division is Kirk Cousins. There's no question about it. I mean, people don't want to admit it, whatever. Look at what he's been able to do the past couple seasons. Now, obviously, Deshaun Jackson is gone. Pierre Garçon is gone in free agency. They did bring in Terrell Pryor, and they have a very good passing-minded head coach in Jay Gruden, who has put together this offense that he excels in, Kirk Cousins, and they throw the football very, very well. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and what is the date coming up that is significant for Kirk Cousins? Isn't it like the 17th or something coming up where they have to make a big decision?
July 17th is the day for people on the franchise tag to get a long-term extension done if you're going to get it done. So basically it comes down right now to 2 players, Kirk Cousins and Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. That's the deadline if they want to get something done more significant than the 1-year franchise tender. And it's basically up to Cousins from his perspective, because Washington wants a long-term deal now. They think he has proven himself, but he sees that dysfunctional front office, I think, and he sees Kyle Shanahan out in San Francisco and says, maybe that's a better situation for me. So I ultimately think he's not going to work out a long-term deal, and he's going to play out his contract.
Yeah, and if he hits the market, I mean, he could put himself into something that you don't see too often, John, which is a starting top, I don't want to say top level, but top half quarterback on the free agent market. Would you say that Cousins, now that it's gotten this far, has put himself in position to really have a lot of power over the Redskins?
Oh yeah, I mean, he's going to be in that range that Derek Carr just signed. He's going to be in the $25 million range,
and that could be with another team. That might not be by just going back to his team. He could be on the market for everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and he has basically all the leverage now because they've franchised him 2 consecutive years. You can't use the franchise tag 3 consecutive years. So if he plays out this year and is healthy and has a similar type Kirk Cousins year, he's going to be on the open market, guaranteed. And obviously, we know the desperation of teams looking for quarterbacks. I just brought up San Francisco. They've signaled they want the bridge route with Brian Hoyer, specifically, I think, because they see Kirk Cousins is going to be potentially available. And then you have Cleveland, obviously. There's no guarantee Cody Kessler or DeShone Kizer are going to be doing anything, so they're going to be in the market. And, there's going to be 8 to 10 teams wanting a quarterback of that level.
John, since we're on the Redskins and talking about Kirk Cousins a little bit, I want to ask you about Doug Williams. He got that promotion to senior VP of player personnel. Is this a guy that can maybe emulate an Ozzie Newsome and be a talent evaluator, or is this just them rewarding a guy for his loyalty to the organization?
No, he's part of the talent evaluation. They've set it up. It's interesting because I just mentioned the dysfunction with what happened with Scott McClugan and him being fired. He had the traditional general manager tag. But Bruce Allen, I always talk about when we talk about rating general managers, the real power in that organization is Bruce Allen, the team president, and nothing's changed. So basically, he's Doug Williams and Jay Gruden both report to him and both sort of have a 50-50 say in personnel matters. And then he makes the ultimate decision. So in a lot of ways, because Scott McClugan had the GM tag, he's got a great reputation as far as being a talent evaluator. People jump to the conclusion because of the title that he was in control. He was never in control. It was Bruce Allen before. It was Bruce Allen now. It's Bruce Allen after Doug Williams got that job.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN, and, of course, national columnist, FanRag Sports NFL, where Eagles training camp will be opening in 16 days at the NovaCare Complex. That'll be quarterbacks, rookies, some selected veterans. The full team will come in on Thursday. And, when we talk about we asked you earlier about that Pro Football Focus having the Eagles at the 15th best passing attack in the league. One of the big things, I think, Doug Peterson wants to throw the ball down the field, John, right? That's something that we're unable to do last year. And when you look at the yards per catch of guys like Torrey Smith and Alshon Jeffrey, 15 and 17 yards respectively, that's going to be a whole new weapon in the passing game that I guess they're factoring in here. Something they could not do at all last year was go downfield. So that's something that they've added significantly much better than they were last year.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And a lot of it depends on if we're going to get the Baltimore Torrey Smith or the San Francisco Torrey Smith the last season. You're rooting for the Baltimore one, who's a true, top-tier deep threat. And even Alshon Jeffrey, as you mentioned, in a different fashion because of his size and his catching radius, he can get down the field and catch the football. So it is a big improvement from that aspect of it because, let's be honest, with Dorial Green, Beckham, and Nelson Aguilar on the outside last year, those guys weren't getting down the football field. And when they did, they didn't catch the football. They didn't even, in a lot of ways, they didn't even compete on certain throws. And I think, when you see Jeffrey in a live environment, I've mentioned it before, he's top 5 in this league as far as 50-50 balls. So it's going to be such an improvement for Carson Wentz's confidence to have a receiver like that who is open no matter what, even when there is coverage. And if you do throw the football, he's going to either go up and catch it or he's going to break it up, and that gives a quarterback a lot of confidence.
John, since we're talking about wide receivers, I did see an article where somebody was trying to posit that the Giants may have the best wide receiving trio in the entire NFL. I don't know if that's the case with Brandon Marshall and Odell Beckham Jr. and Sterling Shepard, but and we know what the Eagles added, and we know what Washington lost. If you were looking at the division and looking at the 4 teams in the NFC East, how would you rank the receiving corps on July 7th?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on. I agree that the Giants trio is the most talented, but again, you got to get them the football, and that's been the problem. Eli Manning is a rapidly descending player, and the guy getting him the football is probably 4th right now in this division at that position. So that's kind of the issue the Giants are dealing with, but. If you're looking at talent level, unfortunately for the Eagles, I would still say they're last at the wide receiver position in this division. You look at the Dez Bryant and Cole Beasley, specifically in Dallas, are tremendous, although Bryant really hasn't been the same since that Jones fracture a couple of years ago, but he's still a top-tier receiver. And as I mentioned, even Washington and all the upheaval. You have Terrell Pryor, who is coming off a tremendous season last year, albeit with a very bad team. You got a former first-round pick out there, so they have talent. And the Eagles are just a lot better than where they were, which was probably 32nd in the NFL. But as I said, there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, and then you throw in the fact that another area where the Giants struggle is running the football.
Yeah. So obviously they have the strength of their team, it developed really rapidly, changing from offense to defense. It's clearly that defense is what carried them to the playoffs last season. And they really did carry that offense because the offense was not good really in any phase.
John, I know one thing with the NFL, when training camp gets here, we always have it used to be Mr. Lehigh. Before that, Hank Baskett was always that guy. Paul Turner has been that guy in the past. Is there a guy that you think will have that moniker this year that we'll hear a lot about but might not contribute a lot during the season as we're talking about wide receivers? That typically is the position that gets a lot gets a lot of ballyhoo.
Yeah, and I mentioned him a little bit yesterday on the show. I think it's going to be Marcus Johnson. It always is. It tends to be a receiver just because of the nature of training camp and how it's developed over the years and the cut down in pads. And we talk about it all the time. There's no more two-a-days. Doug's already said there's going to be 3 live days of hitting. So it really can't even be a running back. It generally always is a wide receiver. And I think that guy's put himself in a position, Marcus Johnson, to make this football team. So I think you're going to be hearing a lot of hype about him coming out of the NovaCare complex.
I guess Pumphrey could be in that mix because the Eagles are going to probably use him a little bit more in the passing game.
Yeah, they certainly did in the offseason. But Pumphrey is, even though he's a mid-round draft pick, he's still pretty high profile because of his college career. So I think people expect things out of him, probably expect too much, to be honest. But I'm not sure if Johnson's on the radar for anyone. And those are the guys who tend to be the sort of Mr. Training Camp guys.
All right, we've got, of course, the weekend, and then we will be cutting down another week off of the training camp calendar. More on the NFL, of course, next week here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. For your NFL fix at JF McMullen on Twitter. By the way, I saw you retweeting some interesting NFL things about Jim Washburn resurfacing. He said he was the Antichrist here in Philadelphia.
El Diablo.
And he confirmed, not that we didn't know, but Andy Reid did not like Jason Babin.
That's pretty funny because, I think Washburn was what was he? You covered him. He was kind of a curmudgeon-y guy, right?
Oh, he's very curmudgeonly, but he did get a bad rap here. I think that was Andy. I mean, so much of the Wide Nine is, there's so much disinformation about that. First of all, it's not a defense, number one. It's just a formation as far as, and Jim Schwartz uses it all the time, uses 9 techniques in certain situations. But the problem there was that Andy Reid, that was the post sort of Jim Johnson era where he sort of gave Washburn his own fiefdom, and he was in charge of the defensive line, and the back seven wasn't on the same page. So that was, I think, one of the biggest problems Andy Reid ever had as far as his decisions on that particular year. And Washburn, left to his own devices, was, hey, let's go get the quarterback. And sometimes that obviously was a detriment to the other 7 players on the field.
All right. The football will be here in 2 weeks. We're all over it here on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. At JF McMullen, check out his national column, FanRag Sports NFL. John, have a good weekend, man.
Hey, you too, guys.